breaking from tradition, football's new sponsorship assets. And to join me on stage and discuss an awful lot of this is, first of all, Misha Sher, who is Vice President, Sport and Entertainment at Mediacom. Morning. And we've also got Shane Stafford, who's Head of Brand at Bet Victor. Good morning.
Morning.
Just to explain a little bit behind the session, sponsorship, obviously, as you will know, is changing a huge amount, so you can't really just have a logo on a shirt and expect that to be the end of your sponsorship. It's a much more interactive experience. It's a much more immersive experience these days. And I think these guys can explain a lot more about that. And I think maybe we start by, if you explain a little bit about your background as in the company and how they have brought up a new brand and how you move things along these days. Misha first.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. Good to be here. Fascinating space to be operating in, and I think we've seen more change in this space in the last couple of years than we probably did in the last sort of 15 and 20. So our business, Mediacom, we're part of WPP Group, so quite a large advertising network. Our business, sport and entertainment, is all about how we enable the brands that we work with. Some of the biggest blue chip brands that you'd be aware of, whether it's Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble, Shell, American Airlines. How do we enable these companies to leverage the power of sport and entertainment to really, shift their business, or to really impact their business? Now, the space in which we operate, it's all about how do we integrate that with their broader marketing. So rather than looking at sponsorship as a silo, as a quite a specific silo, but rather as an integrated, as I was saying earlier, something that sits across so many different channels now, be that social, digital, experiential, SEO, whatnot. How do we make sure that what they do in that environment plays out across all the channels, and it's all optimized and ultimately driving results back to the business and connecting with the very consumers that they're looking to reach through these partnerships?
Shane, maybe you can explain as well through Bet Victor sort of what sponsorship deals, what the big ones are with the company and how they work with sport.
Yeah, well, our main sponsorship deal is with Liverpool FC, which was one we negotiated, and coming from Paddy Power, where we had a couple of sponsorship deals with different football companies through the years. Coincidentally, Liverpool at the start, then we moved into Arsenal. Like, the deal we negotiated with Liverpool was a very lucrative one. It was one that we've seen much more benefit, and the involvement of the back and forth and how we work with them has been really beneficial. As well as that, we've done sponsorships in darts. So we have the World Match Play, which was completely new to me when I moved over into the role in the Bet Victor, because I'd never been at a darts match before. I was then hosting one in Blackpool. I'd never been to Blackpool. It was an experience in itself. So when I went and seen how involved, when you talk about fan engagement, these people essentially take a week off work, dress up for the entire week, and it's their holiday. And you can't get better engagement than that. So it was an eye-opener for me. But bringing it back to football, it's from working with different clubs through the years, the Liverpool deal has now opened up, as Misha has said, going into social, and how we use it in social is the key factor for us for engagement. For me, it's two-prong. It's obviously we've a training kit sponsor, so we are the brand on the training kit. But with that comes, in any kind of sponsorship deal, it's like, oh, it's a company here just to throw its brand on something. It's to try and get that engagement with loyal fans and say, we're more than just a company that's trying to get our brand out there. We want to engage with the fans. And then it's also the wider engagement and getting kind of using the assets that we have and that we've agreed, and kind of getting social engagement with them. And then fortunately for us, we got television as well. So we managed to get, I don't think it'll ever happen again, but we managed to get Jurgen Klopp to do our television commercial, which was at the time something that just came up in a conversation as it's almost like a question. I was waiting for a no, it'll never happen. slowly we got through, and it was, oh, this might happen. Then we got to a point where we were setting up the cameras. I still thought it was going to be pulled, but we managed to get it done, and that in itself has almost, for us, paid for any kind of deal we've had with Liverpool from the beginning.
I think all of that is the crux of what the session is supposed to be about, which is maybe the 18 to 24 age group aren't bothered about just seeing things. It's all about fan engagement now. It's all about everything being an experience rather than just looking at something. And I think particularly, Misha, you know, for somebody like me, thinking that 20 million followers on Twitter is a good thing, but actually that's almost in the past already, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think if I look at how many rights holders over the past couple of years have sort of pitched or proposed their partnerships, they talk about all these millions of fans they have on social networks. 20 million on here, 25 million there, 11 million on Instagram. That actually, to a brand, that doesn't mean anything, right? Because it's whether that's Victor or whether that's Procter & Gamble or Coca-Cola, they're interested in a very specific audience, right? So unless you as a football club, as a federation, whatever, unless you can identify and be very specific about who you demonstrate you understand exactly who your audience is, where they are, how to engage, and how you can actually enable that brand by working with you to connect with these people, to engage with them, to build that affinity, and ultimately that will ultimately lead to purchase. That's what they're looking for. Because otherwise, if you just quote the numbers, and even if you say 60% are males and 40% are females, doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's not, it's a bit irrelevant because depending on the company, they might be looking at a very specific segment. For example, how much of that audience is 18 to 24-year-olds, right? How much time do they spend on this particular platform? What is their engagement level? Because you might have, out of that, you might have a tiny fraction because I've seen some studies recently saying that since 2010, something like there's been a 42% decrease in the amount of, in the number of 18 to 24-year-olds watching linear TV. Yet, in most of the sponsorship proposals you see today, that sort of linear TV type exposure is what's the biggest sort of selling point. So I think that's where the disconnect is, from my point of view.
Shane, in terms of trying to get to the product, getting to sell a product, what do you do now to change how people are getting to that point?
Well, one, you have to open it up to, as Misha said, that you've got, for Liverpool, the reach is huge, but then you're bringing it down into a smaller niche market of 18 to 45-year-olds. Then you're even bringing it into a smaller market of 18 to 45-year-olds that actually bet. Bring that down to there and then trying to communicate with them at a point in time where, as I said, like more people are streaming online, watching matches, less people are engaging or watching it on television. So we have to kind of find that pinch point through social. So when we do anything like an engagement piece or we show an ad, we have to kind of target that pool again and then retarget using that reach, and then kind of go down into narrowing it down into their age, their if they're ABC1, and start pushing other activity at them. So we don't have huge budgets. So with Facebook changing their algorithms, and it used to be a case of you could do a blanket campaign for a month, and your segments. Now it's a case, if you do that, you're not going to get the reach you want or the specific target reach you want. So now it's a case of you nearly have to top load it. So you one day push, make sure you saturate your potential market, and then the other days you just do increments of it, and you try it through different parts of the day as well. And slowly you'll get better return on investment doing it that way. But it's really getting those pools that you can almost, I'm not saying fish and reference, but target them again and keep on bringing them back. You might not engage with them in the first instance, but if you keep on showing them repeat content that they've engaged with, eventually you'll have a customer. So.
I know we're specifically talking about football today, but maybe both of you have examples of companies or other sports that have used content in that way to get the fan engagement and have done it very well?
Well, one of the examples we spoke about earlier that I really like is what Wimbledon have done with IBM. So this is to me it's a perfect example of a rights holder brand really sort of getting with the times, understanding sort of what's happening with the fans, what's happening with consumption, and basically what they've done is they've developed an entire sort of second screen experience for fans, realizing that, hey, Wimbledon's is one of the preeminent sporting events in the world. It shouldn't just be now with the evolution of technology and the way that people can access some of this content. There'd be millions of people in Asia and South America and New Zealand who want to follow, who don't just want to follow the games, but want to be able to participate and want to be, want to get that much closer to the, rather than being a spectator, getting that much closer to the, to the games, to the players, to the competitions that they follow, and try to bridge that gap so that someone who's watching or following the match in Thailand doesn't feel necessarily that far removed from someone who is in, Southwest London. And at the same time, you have IBM who, if they just had a logo saying IBM, to most people in the audience doesn't really mean anything, right? Because you don't really, okay, IBM, I guess I kind of know IBM and I think they make computers and that's that. But actually they're, by developing something like that, that really takes into account how people are, how they're basically using their technology and their access to data to open up access to engage with people. I think there was like 60 or 70 million people at some point, watching at any given time. I mean, that's incredible. And meanwhile, IBM is telling the story about what they actually do, which is being able to process this incredible amount of data and be able to give it to you in a way that you can easily understand, right? Rather than try to explain algorithms and so on. There you are as a fan. You have Novak Djokovic playing against
Nadal,
whatever. And you can see the historical sort of, the history of these guys playing against each other and when this guy serves, how this happens. And again, it's just sort of, it makes you recognize the fact that people are increasingly fans. That's not just tennis fans. Any fans want to be closer to the teams and the events that they follow. So, as a brand or as a rights holder, if you can enable that interaction, if you can bring the fans closer by working with your partners, for me, that's just it's a perfect example in the current environment of what happens. Not the only one at all, but a really one worth mentioning. I don't know if you can think of some others, maybe.
I'm actually going to continue with IBM, and for a different reason, for in stadiums and how they've actually introduced in a number of stadiums the Internet of Things. So they've actually integrated where they have apps that when you go in, it talks to you, not talks to you, but they talk to each other. So it's essentially, if you wanted to go and get a drink through the match, you can actually check when the queue is less busy. The same for the one that I benefit from more is the toilet queues, and it's a case of when's the most optimum time to use them. But it's actually given a benefit to the fan, to the customer, that's showing things and integrating into it. So without actually saying this is IBM, it's stating this is IBM, this is the technology that gets you into it. So other brands and other companies that work in the tech sector, I think there's a lot to learn from them.
One of the things about being female, probably similarly in this room, you never need to worry about the toilets at sports events, always. If we maybe take it to the younger level of 18 to 24-year-olds, a word that's used a lot is influencers. The groups of people are YouTubers. I presume most people sort of understand how that works, but maybe it would be worth having a bit of insight from both of you on that younger group and what they do and how you get that interaction from them to have a knock-on effect to what you want to build for a brand.
Well, for us, we did for the Euros, we did a big promotion, the £1 Million Goal, which we took a step away from our competitors, where our competitors would offer, money back if your team draws, money back if they hit the post, money back if things, or we'll give you 20 quid if Rooney scores. He won't be scoring anytime soon now for international. But we decided to say, well, we'll put all our investment into one package and we'll give £1 million out to the person that predicts the correct score and the player that will score in the final. So we pushed that message. We found that very effective with influencers. The only advice I'd give in hindsight, knowing with influencers, is cap guidelines for influencers. They're starting to get very rigid on the restrictions that you have to make sure that you're mentioning it's a promotion, and it's something that I see a lot of people coming in marketing, and they're throwing a lot of money into influencers, and it's a grey area at the moment where people are going to get caught out soon because they're going to start bringing in those restrictions that it has to be. It's almost like this is an advertisement. But we worked with Ball Street, and the work we did with Ball Street was very effective, to a point where when the semi-finals happened and we were coming to the final, the amount of engagement we got, we were trending on Twitter. I know that's not the be-all and end-all, but it was something that really got it out there. We were really fortunate that there was one winner of the £1 million goal. It could have worked out that there would be 20, there could have been 200 winners of it, but we were really fortunate that there was one. So then we had that almost tidal wave effect of, then we could push that in PR as well, and with influencers that kind of generated more traffic for us. So we actually seen at the start, so from June, when we started in May, it was like a slow build up. When it got to the final, it was up here, we seen it drop down, but then from the PR and all, we seen another wave that brought us into August and September, which was really good for us.
Is there a danger there that you sometimes can't control the influencers, though, from what you're saying? Is that where the restrictions have to come in?
Well, it's just making it apparent that they're advertising something for you.
But you can't control their message as well, can you?
No,
what they're
you
putting
can't.
out about your brand.
Yeah, and there's that fact as well, but it's more like when they're engaging in content on, most of the stuff they were talking about was, who do you think would be the goal scorer, famous goals. So the whole message of that campaign was, instead of talking about the matches, we were talking about the goals. So we kind of looked strategically at it, like the traffic on searches after a goal was scored is actually bigger than the traffic of people looking at results at the end. So the conversation is about the goals. So instead of investing a huge budget and just talking about the match, we talked about the goals, which was effective for us. And with influencers, it was more effective because that conversation continued well after the match.
Is that the way forward that you see as well, Misha?
Yeah. Look, it's an interesting space to follow because, as Shane says, it's a bit tricky when initially the whole appeal about influencers is the fact that it's quite authentic. Right, you have these people who didn't get into the space to be necessarily an influencer, or to be able to necessarily monetize the audience that they've got. Right, so the reason people follow them and engage with them is because they feel like there's that real level of kind of being real or authentic. Where that once someone becomes quite big and every other day they're doing a campaign or they're doing something for a brand, I think that becomes difficult. But that said, saying that, I've just in the 5 years that I've been in our business, this wasn't even a conversation. 3 years ago, probably 3-4 years ago, it wasn't a conversation. Now we have entire teams within. We have a social team, but we have an entire sort of influencer marketing team because. I would say 75% of the brands that we work with use influencers in some shape or form, and again, it's because when we talk about now everything has to be quite personalized for these companies. It's not about mass reach. While it's important, there's an element of just driving kind of broader awareness, but ultimately what people want is to engage with a very specific segment of people, and that's what influencers allow you to do. And influencers tend to have a much higher engagement level with their audience than some of the well-known athletes that we know of. Right? They can have tens of millions of followers, but relatively low level of engagement. Whereas some of these influencers might have, I don't know, let's say 1 million or 500,000 followers, but they are, they're 80% engagement or something like that, and that's, that's important, and it's quite a cost-effective way, oftentimes to kind of activate and engage with different segments of the audience. Yeah.
Shane, in terms of controlling the message, as I was talking about, if you're using YouTubers who are reviewing things, I suppose on the brand side, there's another side to it, which is you can't always control what the review is or what YouTubers are going to say, which is another very large section of sponsorship and branding these days.
You can't control everything, and as like on my side, coming from a disruptor brand, sometimes it's better not to control everything. Like sometimes backlash and media backlash is a good thing. Like the old saying, like no news is bad news. It's you keep on getting.
All publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, you can apologise. Sometimes apologising brings that up. Oh, you didn't apologise correctly. Thankfully, it's never happened to us as a brand as of yet. But it's gotten to points where there could be discussion levels, particularly in Liverpool. There was a great example of I think it was the Liverpool Echo had said that we were affiliated with Sunbet or Sun, the Sun newspaper, which is a no-go area when you're working with a brand like Liverpool. And we weren't. Subsequently, this went out and it went crazy for a while. We had to work with Liverpool FC to get that message controlled. And through it, we got better sentiment that we kind of reacted to it. It was a horrible 2 days, in fairness, of back and forth emails, making statements, talking to legal. But in the end, we controlled the message, and then we retargeted these people with engagement pieces afterwards. So, like, it was a positive for us that happened from a negative. So,
in terms of the personalisation and that individual element, which is particularly, I think, what the younger audience seem to want at the moment, how can brands push towards that direction these days? What are the ways of activating that kind of engagement?
Well, there's the beauty you have these days. I don't want to just throw words out there, but you've got so much data, you've got so much insight these days. We're quite fortunate in our business to have access to a lot of that. So whether that's purchasing behavior, whether that's what kind of content people watch and where and how and what they share and things like that. I mean, that's the beauty, is that all of that is readily, well, I would say readily, but it's available. And if you wanted to get your hands on it, you could. And all the brands that we work with are asking those questions, are looking at every sort of bit of insight to understand exactly how to deliver the right message at the right time to the right audience on the right platform, and things like that. So it's again, I guess it's how you sort of taking the guesswork out and using all the using all of that insight that's available to the brand. And I would put that on, extend that out to the rights holders. That's where the challenge to the rights holder, again, if they're clubs in the rooms or federations or leagues, the onus on you is to demonstrate that you understand your audience to the same level that your brand would expect you to understand your audience. So to say that we've got, hey, we have, we're very strong with 18 to 24-year-olds. We put out. And we know that because we put out this sort of content, and we have, I don't know, 25, 30, 40% engagement, and actually these people share this content, they like it, and so, being able to demonstrate that as a rights holder is what's going to differentiate you, and put you in position to actually potentially get that partner on board, because you can demonstrate that you have the audience, you have the channels, you have the means, you have a way of engaging them, and that's kind of where and understanding that really you're in the business now of not competing with other football clubs, you're in the business of competing with esports, you're in the business of competing with Netflix, because that's sort of, I think that's where the biggest sort of mind shift that needs to happen within the football industry, definitely, is realizing that you're not up against another football club. You have to demonstrate to a brand X, to Intel, or to to Amazon, whoever it is that you're pitching to, that you can engage with their audience that they want to reach better, more effectively than other sport and entertainment options that they have at their disposal, and people have more options at their disposal than they've ever had before, and that's that's sort of where that's where we're getting to. So rather than saying that we've won more trophies than Chelsea, or we've got more more fans or bigger broadcast reach, it's about demonstrating how you're more innovative and you're more and you completely understand the environment in which they operate, and you're able to compete for attention, for people's attention, as effectively as as some of these other platforms.
Particularly with the shorter attention spans as well.
Correct.
These days.
Yes.
How do you choose who you want to partner with then? Because as Misha's saying, there are so many options out there now.
Depending on for football, Liverpool was one of the obvious choices for us because I had the same kind of history as Beth Victor. We're 75 years established. There's a lot of history. Liverpool, they're celebrating their 125th anniversary this year. There was a lot riding in, and that was something when we were looking at the partnership last season, was how we see effectively the 3-season deal and how we can communicate our comms through that as well. So obviously there's the teething part of when you sign a new deal and you're starting to work with a new partnership team and you start engaging and doing content, but looking at how the wider comms on that, and also looking at a brand and our own brand, which I feel a lot of brands going into the digital space, into social, don't get. You have brands that work really well, like the likes of BMW, that go in and just throw out one message. Sometimes that's not the case on social. Sometimes the brand's like a personality, and I'll be sitting here talking quite professional. Tonight I could be sitting in a pub talking completely different, and like your personality, you can be funny, you can be quite sober, you can be quite entertaining, and it's finding that level, whereas usually with brands it was communicating one message consistently across. It's now to a point of look at how you engage with personalities through social, be somewhat more entertaining. We've found, as we were talking earlier, that we did an engagement piece for the 125th anniversary for the training kit, basically a message of it's not just the team that bring it to the table, it's all the support staff, it's all the crews that help, it's the guys that mow the lawn, it's everything that brings Liverpool its success. The same thing can be said with the content that was engaged with. But then we did a piece for the darts with John Barnes and Jason McIntyre, where they were kicking football at a giant dartboard. And that got way more engagement because it was that kind of disposable 10 seconds of watching a guy kick. So there's a nice balance, and if you do it in the right order, that you can keep engagement but also keep entertainment, there you just get a better reach.
How do you now quantify a successful partnership then? Because from what you're both saying, it doesn't particularly sound like it's always just looking at the finances.
Every single brand that goes into a partnership will have completely different objectives. You have some Asian companies now, Chinese companies that no one's ever heard of, or many people in this part of the world wouldn't have ever heard of. They're coming into the space, aligning with some of the most prestigious sporting events, be it FIFA or IOC. And whilst there's a longer term strategy in terms of what they ultimately want to achieve. Primarily, and to start with, it is all about sort of gaining that acceptance and awareness and trust that comes from associating with these kind of properties. You have in other instances, it could be mature brands like Coca-Cola who don't have to tell you who Coca-Cola is, right? So for them, it's all about how can, by partnering with FIFA or with Rugby World Cup, how are they through that partnership going to be able to get a particular a particular location within within the distribution channels, be that at Tesco's or Sainsbury's, and be able to drive product. And they'll probably measure, as an example, they'll measure how much product as a result of that partnership they're able to sell in that particular time. But it's we're working with a brand, working with a American company who's now got into Germany, and they're gonna get through that partnership. They're gonna evaluate how they're driving, how the affinity with the brand evolves over that time, because one of the reasons they align with football and how they're going to execute their content is all about connecting with people in that country and not feeling like a foreign brand foreign company that's got nothing to do with them. So it really depends. But what's important is that from both sides, you're very clear, right? Very clear from the beginning exactly what success looks like, and sort of work backwards. That's how we approach things. We come in with from the very start, say what do we all, where do we want to be, and work backwards for 2-3 years, and how we're gonna build up that story. But you want to be very clear about what success looks like, and that you have very specific strategies. That could be how with this particular company, Indeed, how are they going to engage in the Frankfurt area with some of the biggest businesses, and they'll be able to clearly demonstrate how much new business they've been able to generate as a result of that. How they drive affinity is going to be something else, and they're going to use different channels to measure it. What's the engagement? There isn't one matrix, and I think anyone in the room who's been in the space will realize there isn't one answer. It'll depend on the specific brand and a specific time on their journey where they are, maturity, I guess.
Can you calculate the kind of return? It sounds like you can't really calculate the kind of return that you're expecting to get, and when you're first making that deal with a company.
No, so you'd go in as a company and say, so we deal in first-time depositors. So they made just a pie-in-the-sky estimate of this is the amount of first-time depositors we want over this 3-season deal. When we started the deal, to give just as an example, so our first-time depositors, so we had a deal with Chelsea before this. Now it's only a betting partner, but the amount of FTDs that we had for the year with Chelsea, we secured in the first 2 weeks with Liverpool, with our comms and our promotions. So with that, we've actively seen, we've done basically a free, from the £1 million goal, we went into the golden goal, which is a weekly prediction thing that you can do for free. We used Jurgen Klopp to advertise that on television to great effect. So we've seen the benefit of this, to a point of from Tier A games where we would be doing the golden goal, so we stuck to every Sunday. We've seen higher reach and higher searches for our brand on those days than we actually see on the it would be United Arsenal game. So it was really effective for us, but it's much like television. It's you can only get figures back on estimated reach. Trying to get an accurate, this brought in this many people through organic direct. It's your brand is out there. It's triggered. It stays in the top of the mind of people for some time. It might be through PPC that when they're searching for something, they see one of our ads up, that they end up engaging with us. Then it's just keep the brand front of mind.
Is there anything that you see in other countries that aren't maybe specific to Europe or to this country that is being done that maybe we can take a look at and say, well, that's how you start pushing it forward?
I think when I look at U.S. sports, it's often usually things sort of start there because it's a very competitive sports market, and they've been sort of at the forefront of innovation in that space. I think they do some really, again, if you look at NFL, Major League Baseball, basketball, college football, I mean, it is so competitive. So they have to work very, very hard, and all the brands that are associated with those sports have to work so hard to drive, to be able to drive share of voice. And what I've seen, and what I like in US is how they embrace and they're ready to test some of the new sort of, whether that's social channels like, let's say, Snapchat, or some of the new technology like VR or AR, because it is all about sort of pushing the boundaries and trying to see how they can how they can move with the times, really. And I think when I looked at, again, Snapchat, I mean, a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, I would have never heard of Snapchat. And now, what they're projecting to be bigger than Twitter, and in many ways they already are in terms of the audiences that they have, the age groups, the engagement levels, and so on. And rather than sort of sitting back, you have NFL and other rights holders. They embrace that. They go right into it. They go with their partners. They say, "Hey, Pepsi, why don't we start doing something on Snapchat?" And they're getting, Wimbledon, and they're getting this sort of the engagement that I think, that a lot of people would be would be envious of here. So, I guess my advice as you sit in the room is to think about, how are you and your organizations, how are you innovating, right? What is it that you're doing today different than what you were doing even 2-3 years ago, because things have moved on so quickly, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make talking about different businesses here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's large investments, but you should be looking to be at the forefront of all these developments, especially as sports are getting more global. So if you want to connect with an audience in the U.S. and you realize that 35% of them are on Snapchat between the ages of 18 to 24, good idea to be there, or to have a strategy for it. Same with when you look the other way, when you look at Thailand, or you look at the Middle East, the way people consume whatever you have as a football club is so different around the world. It makes sense to really identify, to understand exactly what are the different dynamics that drive that engagement interaction, and be able to make sure that, hey, we really make sure we need to be on top of Snapchat in the U.S. Make sure we're building that fan base. We really need to make sure that we're on Facebook in the Middle East because it's the most, or YouTube, because it's the most used channel in which people engage with our property. So and realize that it's not Facebook, it's not Google, it is very regionalized, and people want that personalized experience. They want to feel it in the way that they like, wherever they live, because they've become accustomed to it in other aspects of their lives. That's what it is.
Yeah. What does football have that sponsors want to get involved with? This is about new sponsorship assets. So what are those assets within football, actually, that everyone wants to be involved with?
Well, it's the loyal fan base is one. So, like, football is probably one of the most loyal fan bases you can get. It's that anything that club produces, they quickly snap up and engage with. It's that habitual thing that they get up, and they're looking for the weekend match, or now during the week as well. But it's something that they're constantly coming back to. So it's how to piggyback onto that loyalty, and as a brand, kind of communicate that we share the same values as this club, and reach as many people potentially as possible. But it was a good thing that Misha said about strategy. So we say go into Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter. Don't just go into it without a strategy. I've seen lots of brands, people I used to work with that jumped onto Snapchat and hadn't got a clue what they were doing, didn't know how to communicate the same way. They were trying to show films, like, so they start introducing video that's 15 seconds, and they try to tell a story, whereas it's an engagement piece. It's doing a spot of entertainment. So strategy is key in that, and it's how to utilize those assets as well. Like, so with our partnership, we have an allotment of access to players, to managers. It's all good, you negotiate a partnership, but you need to know what you're going to do with that allotment throughout the season, and kind of plan for, right, we'll do interviews with them, because time is precious as well. We'll do stunts with them, we'll use them for this piece, we'll try and cross-pollinate into our other biggest events, or horse racing. So March and April, we try and use footballers and bring them in, and bring their customer base into that as well. But you need to have that strategy in place, or you're after investing in a partnership that essentially, and I've seen a lot of companies do it, they've invested in a partnership and they don't know how to utilize it. So all they're using is the LEDs at the side of the match, and the interview backdrop branding, and maybe a sponsorship thing. So it's a waste.
A long way to go by the sounds of things.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing that football's got going for it is it's live, it's social, and it's global. You know, and there's nothing else really that can compete with it on that, you know, on that scale. You have some, you know, Formula One to some, you know, to some degree, but, you know, not in the same, you know, not the same frequency, and not in the same level as football. So, and it comes down to compelling content. You know, people, it's you know, it's unscripted drama. That's what, you know, that's what it is, and that's what all, you know, anyone who's in this industry and works for rights holder, that's what you've got. You know, that's what your you know, that's what your USP is. Now, if you can articulate, you know, if you can articulate that in the right way, if you can translate into not just saying we're, you know, yeah, we've got heritage, but we can actually, you know, we can deliver that all year round, not just, you know, not just through our broadcast deal with Sky or whatever, but actually we can get your brand behind the scenes. We could tell, you know, we can enable you to tell stories of what goes on at training or in the lead up to the game, and all these things. That's what people want. You know, they crave that connection. They love the game. They want to get closer to the game, and that's, you know, I think that's the, you know, that's ultimately the appeal. You know, it's the emotion. You know, sport gives brand that emotional connection with people that that they don't themselves, and, you know, brands themselves don't have that, right? So they're trying to leverage the equity that these institutions have built over many years. There's nothing to replace that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's very much about thinking differently and making me feel very old with the younger elements of the conversation. Misha, Shane Stafford, thank you very much. That was football's new sponsorship assets. Enjoy the rest of your day at SoccerX. Thank you.
Thank you.